my husband of 10 years, had a secret plan. He thought he was going to blindside me, file for divorce, and walk away with half of the company I built with my own 2 hands. He thought I was just his loving, naive wife, too busy and too trusting to see the dagger he was hiding behind his back. What he didn't know was that I had already found it, and I was about to show him what happens when you try to light a match in a room you've already filled with gasoline. For a decade, I believed our marriage was the one unshakable thing in my life, the bedrock. David and I were a team, or so I thought. We were building a future in our beautiful craftsman home just outside of Seattle, a life funded by the branding agency I had started from my spare bedroom and grown into a successful, respected firm. I saw him as my partner, my biggest cheerleader. But over the last year, the foundation began to feel like quicksand. It started with small tremors, the kind you dismiss as nothing. A shift in the air between us. We'd be on the sofa after dinner, the comfortable quiet I used to treasure now feeling heavy and suffocating. His phone, which he used to leave lying around carelessly, became an extension of his hand, always tilted just so, away from my line of sight. He'd chuckle at something on the screen, a private joke I wasn't part of. If I walked into the room while he was on a call, it would end with a sudden, clipped, "Hey, I need to jump off." At first, I did what anyone would do. I rationalized it. He's bored, I thought. Maybe he's feeling adrift since he left his marketing job to figure things out. I gave him space. I suggested hobbies. I tried to be the supportive, understanding wife he'd always known. But the more space I gave him, the wider the canyon between us grew. Then, the subtle tremors became full-blown warning bells. The financial inquiries started. David had never cared about the inner workings of my company. To him, it was just the magic engine that produced our comfortable lifestyle. He enjoyed the benefits, the dinners out, the vacations to Hawaii, but he'd glaze over if I ever talked about client acquisition or profit margins. Suddenly, he was an amateur forensic accountant. "Claire," he'd ask, looking up from his tablet with a practiced nonchalance, "that business line of credit you have, what's the utilization on that right now?" A few days later, it would be, "I was just thinking about the house. With the market being so crazy, how much equity do we actually have? Is it considered a 50-50 asset even though the down payment came from your pre-marriage savings?" The questions became sharper, more specific. "That investment account your grandmother left you, is that legally separate property? And the intellectual property for the agency, the brand name and all that, who technically owns that?" When I mentioned it to my friends over brunch, they waved it away. "He's probably just reading some finance blog," one said. "He wants to be more involved. That's a good thing, isn't it?" This wasn't a newfound passion for physical thing. This was surveillance. Each question was a pin being methodically pushed into a map of my financial life, marking every point. A cold, sickening certainty began to form in the pit of my stomach. He wasn't planning for our future. He was planning for his own, separate future, funded by me. The illusion shattered completely on Thursday afternoon. He was out for a run, and I needed to find a confirmation email for a flight on his iPad, which we shared. I opened his email, and there it was. I wasn't digging, I wasn't searching. It was the very top message, the subject line a punch to the gut. "Ray, strategy for asset division." The air left my lungs. My hands started to shake as I clicked it open. It was an email thread between David and a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney from a top firm in downtown Seattle. They had been corresponding for nearly 2 months. They had discussed filing dates, how to leverage his status as the stay-at-home husband for maximum payout, and how to frame the narrative to make me look like a cold, career-obsessed woman who had emotionally abandoned him. It was vile, but it wasn't the worst part. I went to his text messages, synced from his phone, and found the conversation that turned my world to ash. It was with his best friend, Tom. "She has no clue, man," one of David's texts read. "She's so buried in her agency, she still thinks I adore her. The woman is brilliant at business, but a complete fool when it comes to people. It's actually kind of sad how much she trusts me." Tom replied, "You really think you can get a piece of the company? I thought that was all hers from before you guys got married." David's response made me want to vomit. "My lawyer says it's a slam dunk. We argue that my unpaid domestic labor and emotional support created the environment for her to succeed. We'll call it sweat equity. By the time she gets served, I'll have a motion to freeze her business accounts. She'll be so shocked and heartbroken, she won't be able to think straight. I'm walking out of this with the house, half her cash, and a permanent income stream from the company she loves more than me. She'll be lucky to keep her office afloat." I had to sit on the floor, my head between my knees. The man I had shared a bed with for a decade, the man I had supported financially for the last 3 years while he found himself, the man whose hand I held when his father was sick, was talking about me like I was a target, a business transaction. The love, the shared dreams, the 10 years of our life together, it was all a lie. A long, elaborate deception, and he was about to cash in. He thought I was weak. He thought my love for him was a fatal flaw he could exploit. He was about to discover that the same focus and strategic thinking I used to build an agency from nothing could also be used to dismantle a traitor. That night, I lay next to him in bed, listening to the steady, peaceful rhythm of his breathing, and I felt a chilling calm settle over me. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound in my chest, but it was being encased in ice. If he wanted to turn our marriage into a corporate takeover, then I would treat it like one. But I wouldn't be the target of a hostile acquisition. I would be the CEO defending my company. The next morning, I told my team I was taking a personal week, the first in the company's history. I didn't call the friendly family lawyer who had drawn up our wills. I researched and found the most formidable, discreet family law attorney in the state, a woman named Ms. Albright. I walked into her sleek, modern office overlooking Puget Sound, feeling like a ghost, and I laid out the entire story. The 10-year marriage, the company I built, his recent unemployment, and the screenshots from his iPad that served as a declaration of war. Ms. Albright, a sharp woman with piercing blue eyes, listened to my entire story without saying a word. When I finished, my voice cracking, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered a strategy. "Claire," she said, her tone level and direct, "what your husband is planning is a predatory financial assault disguised as a divorce. His entire strategy hinges on the element of surprise and your emotional reaction. We are going to neutralize both. We are not going to do anything illegal. We are going to use the law to build a fortress around what is yours, and we're going to do it before he even knows there's a battle." For the next 10 days, my life was a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and silent, calculated maneuvers. While David was at the gym or meeting up with friends, I was in Ms. Albright's office, executing her game plan. On her precise guidance, we created a sophisticated, irrevocable trust. I legally transferred the ownership of my agency into this trust. It was a standard, legitimate business protection strategy, and since it was executed before any divorce papers were filed, its timing was legally perfect. My personal savings, much of which was from before the marriage, were moved from our joint accounts to a new individual account that was legally defined as my separate property. We dusted off our prenuptial agreement, a document David had laughed at when we signed it a decade ago, saying it was just a formality we'd never need. Its terms were crystal clear. The business I started prior to our marriage was to remain my sole and separate property. In his greed, he had completely forgotten its existence. I was protecting my life's work. I was drawing a clear, legal line in the sand. When the time came, he would receive his fair and legal share of the marital assets we had accumulated together, and not $1 from the empire he was plotting to steal. Exactly 2 weeks after I found the emails, he made his move. He set the scene like a bad television movie. He made my favorite pasta, opened a nice bottle of wine. He sat me down at our dining room table, his eyes full of well-rehearsed sorrow. "Claire," he started, his voice thick with fake emotion, "this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. I'm not happy. I think we need to get a divorce." He was waiting for the explosion. The tears, the begging, the "what did I do wrong?" He had a response for all of it, but I took away his script. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him with a profound, quiet sadness, which was entirely real, just not for the reason he imagined. "I understand, David," I said, my voice soft. "If you aren't happy, then you aren't happy. We shouldn't stay together." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. This wasn't in the playbook. He recovered quickly, though, misinterpreting my calm acceptance as defeated resignation. He thought I was a broken woman, ready for the slaughter. For the next week, as his lawyer sent the initial documents to mine, I let him think he had already won. I played the part of the sad, shell-shocked wife. Then came the phone call, the one between his lawyer and Ms. Albright. It was supposed to be a routine introductory call, the opening move in his hostile takeover. Instead, it was the moment his entire world detonated. I would give anything to have been a fly on the wall when David got the subsequent call from his own attorney. "David," I can just hear him saying, his voice tight with panic, "we have a significant problem. Claire's agency, she doesn't own it anymore. It's held in a bulletproof trust. There's no way to touch it. The savings you identified, they've been legally moved and segregated as premarital assets. And the house, there's a new lien against it tied to her business trust, which makes it a complicated liability, not a simple asset to divide. And David, she has the prenup, and her lawyer is ready to enforce every single clause. The future he had designed for himself, the sprawling house, the endless checks from my hard work, the triumphant victory over his foolish wife, it all dissolved into smoke. He wasn't facing a life of leisure. He was facing a life with what he was legally entitled to, which, after 3 years of not working, was not very much at all. That's when the real David appeared. The desperate panic I saw in his texts now came out in person. The phony grief was gone, replaced by a frantic, cloying charm. Suddenly, a divorce was the last thing he wanted. The calls and texts started, sickeningly sweet. He left my favorite pastries on my doorstep. He sent me old photos of us on our first trip to Italy, reminiscing about how happy we were. One evening, he came to the corporate apartment I was staying in, breaking down in a performance that was truly breathtaking in its dishonesty. "I made a horrible mistake, Claire." He sobbed, his face buried in his hands. "I was just lost and scared. It was never about the money, I swear. I was just lashing out. Can't we please go to counseling? Can we please just try?" I looked at him, at the face I once loved, now twisted into a mask of pathetic desperation. "No, David," I said, my voice completely flat, denying him the emotional reaction he was trying to manufacture. "You don't regret what you did. You only regret that it didn't work." His face transformed. The mask of sorrow melted away, replaced by a contemptuous snarl. The begging stopped. The accusations began. "You're hiding assets. That's illegal. You manipulated me. You schemed behind my back." He was trying to flip the script, to paint himself as the victim of a ruthless financial predator. But it was far too late. The truth was already locked and loaded. His game was over. He had tried to put me in checkmate, not realizing I had already won the match 3 moves ago. His meticulous plan had failed, but his war on my character was just beginning. His first salvo was social. He launched a scorched earth campaign among our friends, spinning a tale of heartbreak and betrayal. In his version, I was a cold-hearted monster. I was the one who had been having an affair. I was emotionally abusive, a workaholic who saw him as nothing more than a household accessory. The final, cruel blow, he claimed, was that when he finally got the courage to leave, I drained our accounts and threw him out on the street. He was good at it. He played the part of the wounded, sensitive man so perfectly that, for a little while, it worked. Friends I had known for years sent me cold, one-line texts. The invitations to social gatherings stopped. A couple I considered close sent me a long, vicious email telling me they were disgusted by my behavior. The isolation was a sharp, brutal twist of the knife, compounding the pain of his original betrayal. But Ms. Albright had warned me. When a narcissist's primary plan fails, she had said, they resort to reputational terrorism. Be ready. And I waited. I let his lies marinate, let them spread until they reached their peak. Then I made my move. To a handful of our closest, most important mutual friends, I sent a single email. The subject line was simply, "The other side." Inside, there was no emotional plea, no angry defense. There were only two attachments: the screenshots of his text messages with Tom, the ones where he called me a fool and detailed his plan to ruin me, and the email chain with his lawyer, dated 2 months before he ever asked me for a divorce. The reversal was immediate and absolute. The apologies began pouring in. "Claire, I am so sorry. I feel like such an idiot for believing him. He played us all. We are here for you, 100%. His web of lies didn't just unravel, it evaporated. The very friends he had tried to poison against me were now enraged at him for his deception. His social assassination had backfired, leaving him utterly exposed. Realizing he had lost the support of our friends, he spiraled. His desperation curdled into harassment. He started showing up at my office building. At first, he would just sit in his car, watching. Then he started trying to talk to me in the parking garage, begging, then yelling. My employees, who had only ever known him as my charming husband, now saw him unhinged. Security had to escort him away twice. The third time, he blocked my car with his own and screamed at me until security guards physically removed him from the property. That incident earned him a restraining order. The legal barrier only made him more reckless. He sent me a barrage of emails, swinging wildly from tearful apologies to venomous rants, promising he would destroy me. Then he played his trump card. I got a call from an IRS agent. An anonymous tip had been filed, accusing my company of systemic tax fraud and me of creating illegal shelters to hide money. It was him. I knew it instantly. Since he couldn't get the money in civil court, he was trying to use the federal government as his weapon. For a split second, I felt a jolt of pure terror. Then I remembered the long days in Ms. Albright's office. Every single transaction, every transfer, every legal document had been vetted and executed with surgical precision. We had anticipated this exact, desperate move. The investigation was swift. My lawyers provided the IRS with a mountain of evidence that not only proved my complete compliance with tax law, but also strongly indicated the anonymous tip was a bad faith report from a party in a contentious divorce. The case was closed. Another spectacular failure. That was when he finally hit the bottom. His final, most pathetic act came at 2 in the morning. My phone rang, and it was my old neighbor from across the street. "Claire," he said, his voice laced with alarm. "You better get over here. It's David. He's at the house, trying to break in the front door. He's screaming your name. I've already called the police." I had changed all the locks weeks ago, of course. But in his delusional state, he must have thought he could physically force his way back into the life he had so callously tried to demolish. I drove there, my heart pounding with a toxic mix of fury and a strange, hollow pity. When I arrived, the street was bathed in flashing blue and red lights. 2 patrol cars were parked out front, and there, on my front lawn, lit up like a stage performer, was David. He was a wreck. His hair was a mess, his face was tear-stained and swollen, and he was yelling at a police officer, shrieking about how I had stolen his house, his money, his life. I walked up to the senior officer and introduced myself. He looked from me to the raving man on my lawn and back, a dawning look of comprehension on his face. I calmly explained the situation, the divorce, the restraining order he was currently violating. They asked me if I wanted to press charges. I looked over at David, this collapsed, sputtering shell of a man, all his cunning and arrogance burned away into this pitiful public display. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I don't, but please make it very clear to him that this is the last time. There are no more chances." That was the end, for him and for us. Seeing him there, stripped of all power, dignity, and control, was the final act. He finally knew, with absolute certainty, that he had lost. There were no more cards to play. The divorce was finalized soon after. He walked away with what the prenup stipulated, a small fraction of what he had planned to heist. The last I heard, he had to move back to his hometown in Ohio to live with his parents. The life of luxury and vindication he had been so sure was his had vanished completely. It took time for me to heal. A betrayal like that leaves a permanent scar. But I did heal. My business grew stronger than ever. My true friends rallied around me. And in the quiet evenings in my house, a house that was truly and completely mine, I found a profound sense of peace. He had set out to systematically destroy my life. But in the end, the only life he utterly destroyed was his own.